is your host, Susan Regan.
Hello, I'm Susan Regan, host of Connecticut Valley View, and my guest's reputation precedes him due to his historic achievements, both professionally and personally. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Ben Carson, who was the Secretary of Housing and Development during President Trump's administration. He was a 2016 U.S. presidential candidate. He is a former director of Johns Hopkins University, pediatric neurosurgery, and I might add the youngest, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the land. And in addition, you have received 70 honorary degrees. Having said that, Dr. Carson, it is known that you have often referred to your famous quote regarding your mother, Sonia Carson: "All that I am, or all I ever hope to be, I owe to my mother." I thought that was appropriate to start out for our discussion today.
Absolutely. You know, my story is really her story. If there was anybody who was ever could claim to be a victim, it was her. Huge rural family in Tennessee, less than a third grade education, got married at age 13. Years later, discovered that her husband was a bigamist and had to try to raise two young sons on her own. And yet she never made excuses, but she never accepted excuses either. If we ever made an excuse, the next thing out of her mouth was a poem called "Yourself to Blame." The next question after that was, "Do you have a brain?" And if the answer was yes, then you could have thought your way out of it. It doesn't matter what anybody else did or said. And, you know, growing up in that environment, I think made both my brother and myself people who look for solutions rather than blame.
Well, with that in mind, given the many accomplishments of your life, what do you feel are the areas that you've made the greatest contribution or the greatest difference?
Well, I think in the field of education and helping people to recognize that it really doesn't matter where you came from. If you get a good education in the society that we live in, you can write your own ticket. It's interesting. One of the things I point out in the book, Created Equal, is that there's a lot of people today saying that there's systemic racism, and that's the reason that there's the wealth gap between Black families and white families. But interestingly, I also point out that if you look at Nigerian families in America, Ghanaian families and some others who have Black skin,
yes,
there's no wealth gap. Now, if you go and examine those families, what you find is that there's a tremendous emphasis on education and a tremendous emphasis on family and family values.
Correct.
And interestingly enough, if you look at traditional Black American families who have those values, there's very little or no wealth gap either. So perhaps we're looking at the wrong thing.
Yes. I think that's one of the things, the comment has been made that, let's say in the older, more traditional Black individuals, that the family life was very important and it was unique and it was to be treasured and it was to be focused on, and there was a father and a mother and those traditional family things. I think that's what you're referring to. That provides the unity.
Absolutely. And it really doesn't have anything to do with race. The same is true in white families, Asian families, Hispanic families. And when you look at the statistics of broken families, let's take Black families. If you look at children who are raised by a single mom in Black families, the poverty rate is 45%.
Yes.
The dad poverty rate is 36%. But when both parents are there, the poverty rate is 12%.
Well, you did. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. You did mention your new book, and you've written many books over the years. And your most recent, as you said, is called Created Equal: The Painful Past, the Confusing Present, and the Hopeful Future of Race in America. Now, it's been described as, for the purpose of the book, was a hopeful inspiring roadmap for how America can come together. What was actually your catalyst for writing this book? I mean, there must have been something. Is it the current issue, or is it the current issues that we have, or was there something specific?
It's the fact that in recent years, people seem to be trying to circle everything back around to race. Mm-hmm. And whether it's appropriate or not, that's what they're doing. And they're using the race issue as a cudgel to beat people into submission, to make white people feel guilty, to make Black people and other minorities feel like victims, and dividing our society. That's one of the biggest weapons that they use. They also use age and religion and income and sex and other things to try to divide us into a bunch of little tribes and not working together, not having the synergy. And a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Yes. Well, do you feel that this is of political nature? What is driving that particular trend?
I think there are those who want to fundamentally change our society into something else. Mm-hmm. They don't like it, and they don't like the people-centric model. Now, this goes back a long way. It was never felt by many in Europe that a system like ours could work, because they were used to having a monarch, ruling class. And they say, how can you have a system that is governed on the will of the people? It's impossible. Mm-hmm. And they thought it was a great experiment. Benjamin Franklin, when they came out of the Constitution Hall in 1787, after finishing it, was asked, what do we have here, sir? A monarchy or a republic?
Right.
A republic, if you can keep it. There was a lot of doubt as to whether we could keep it. And I think right now is the severest challenge that we've had as for those who are creating total chaos in our society. Think about it. You defund the police. Mm-hmm. You let violent criminals out to terrorize the people. Mm-hmm. You open the borders. You have economic policies that drive prices through the roof. Mm-hmm. And you just create total chaos. And then you can come along and say, well, see, I told you it didn't work.
Right, right. Well, I think it's often known as create a crisis, and then you fulfill the need to fix it, and they make the most of it. It's on a positive note, and with regard to this previous statement that you made, that you discriminate against people and incur this racial division, you talk about the beauty of America's diversity as well. Talk to that a bit.
Well, you know, we are a nation that is composed of people from virtually everywhere who have a lot of different talents and different ways of looking at things. And we've benefited greatly from that. And I just used an example in the book. I said, let's take African Americans. And what kinds of things have they contributed? I said, you would normally not hear about this.
Yes.
I said, just take a walk down the street. Start with your shoes. Jan Matzliger, a Black man, invented the automatic shoe lasting machine that revolutionized the shoe industry.
Yes.
You step on a clean street. Charles Brooks, who invented the automatic street sweeper, and down that street comes a tractor trailer truck with an air conditioning system. It was Frederick Jones who invented that. And it stops at the red light. Garrett Morgan, a Black man. And he also invented the gas mask, saved lots of lives during the war. And I just go on and on. And anything, and sort of end with Elijah McCoy, who invented the automatic lubrication system for locomotive engines, had so many great inventions, people would say, is that a McCoy?
That's a real McCoy.
Real McCoy?
Yes, yes. Well, that's so interesting. You know, that should be emphasized more. I don't think people realize the contribution is made to our lives. Yeah, I mean, the fact you've even brought it up here in our discussion, I think it's very illuminating. And it's those kinds of things that I'd like to hear from you. They're very candid comments and obviously historical comments, which is very important to the total picture.
But I also make the point that I can take that walk down the street for virtually any group and point to tremendous contributions. And our diversity is not a problem unless we want to make it into one.
Yes. Well, would you agree, I'm going to take this, a critical shortage of critical thinking in a nation relative to CRT, which of course is referred to as critical race theory. And it's being injected into our educational institutions. And what I think bothers me most is that, and I have checked this quite a bit in a number of towns, and they say they're not introducing CRT, they're not discussing CRT, and yet we have had so many parents who have gone to the Board of Education and they are complaining about the curriculum and they believe that CRT is being taught and they mask it over and they call it something else. You address that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine recently was telling about his granddaughter who came home crying. And she said, "Grandpa, am I evil because I'm white?" You must have gotten that from somewhere. And, they changed the name of it and they said, "We're not really teaching CRT, we're teaching something else." And it includes the gender variations also.
Yes.
And teaching that to very young children that you may not actually be a girl or a boy. Why would you confuse young children like that? That's really quite cruel. And I think it may have something to do with trying to destroy our future by indoctrinating our kids.
It's also victimization of a very young child who cannot defend itself. And the parent has to then, as I said, go to the Board of Education. And there has been a great deal of disturbance. And then there have also been superintendents who have actually taken some of the money, the donated money or the taxpayers' money, and actually Board of Education has bought books, a superintendent on their own, gone out and bought books to introduce this subject. And it's very destructive.
The good thing is, as I travel around the country, I'm seeing a lot of parents getting involved. People stand on the sideline with their head down and hope nobody called them a nasty name. They're getting involved. And, this may be a blessing in disguise, because had it not happened, had we not had COVID and the shutdowns and all this, we might have slept right through this while we were changing into a socialist country.
That's very true. It's very true. It sometimes takes an extreme situation in order to bring out the issue to the point where people are brave enough to speak up, because it takes a great deal of bravery to do that. And
well, you can't be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave, right?
Yeah, exactly. And parents are, we look at Ron DeSantis down in Florida, and he's got a Parents' Bill of Rights down there. And that, of course, is running into issues and so forth. But I think that parents in particular, they've hit a sore spot with parents. There are many things that you can, I guess, accuse them of or get them caught up in, taxes and inflation and so forth. But when you start influencing, taking over, the government is here to help, hi, we're the government, we're here to help, then that's where parents, they put up a fence around that and say no.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my own sons had to take his daughter out of the school that he went to. It was a private school. It was a very good school, but they were teaching CRT. He took her out.
Well, all right. Now, you also talk about Black Lives Matter and the destruction that has caused and the misrepresentation. Your thoughts on that?
Well, their website, before we started complaining about it or pointing people to it, actually talked about, their desire to disrupt the nuclear family traditional patriotic values are being disavowed by them.
Yes.
And they admit that they are Marxist. At least they did. They're trying to cover that up now. And you look at the things that they're not doing anything that's helping anybody. No. And you notice that they only seem to get upset when a Black person is killed by a white policeman. But it can be, they can kill people all day long in Chicago, Black on Black crime. Are they complaining about that? No. And that's a much larger number.
Yes. Yeah, I think you even speak to some of the statistics in your book as well, as the number of actual occurrences. Yes. Go ahead.
Because when you see the number of actual occurrences, it's shocking. And there's a survey done asking people, how many unarmed black men are killed by police every year? And they're talking hundreds, in some cases thousands of when in fact, even according to a liberal news source like the Washington Post, in 2018, it was less than 2 dozen. And we're talking about over 50 million police civilian encounters. So it's a tiny number. It's still a tragedy anytime it happens, and we need to be looking at ways to get that number down to 0. But we also need to deal with the real facts and not with things that are trumped up.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is how the media has incurred this misinforming, half the map, half the facts, not even the facts, just commentary.
And you think about how silly it is for them to do that. They are the press is the only business protected by the United States Constitution. And there's a reason for that. It's because they were supposed to disseminate unbiased information to the people, so that the people would know what their will is. They can't know what their will is if they don't get the facts. But now they put their thumb on the scale, distorts the whole process. And obviously they don't know a whole lot about history, because first thing that communist regimes do is they completely control the media. So they're preparing their own demise.
Well, they take the First Amendment applies to them, but it doesn't apply to anyone else.
That's what they think.
Well, I guess what we're saying here is that the narrative in the U.S. is a society of racism. And yet immigrants still see this is the land to come to. This is still the opportunity place.
Why would people be forming caravans trying to get in here if it was such a horrible racist place? And when they got here, they'd be calling all their relatives and friends and saying, don't come here.
That's exactly right. And they'll do anything to, and they'll do anything to stay here too. They travel a long distance. They put themselves in harm. They subject themselves to, where will we live? Who will take care of me? And so forth. So,
well, what the leftists actually want is they want to tell you, don't believe what your eyes are seeing. Don't believe what your ears are hearing. Don't believe what your heart is telling you. Just listen to us. We will tell you what you should think and how you.
Yeah. Well, that's where the critical rational thinking comes in, and why it's so important for children to be subjected to a household that provides critical thinking, not acceptance of a group of sheep who will simply roll with the trend in order to get along, to go along to get along, as it were. Now, you've also stated that your school systems in minority areas are poor quality, and you think dollars are the major issue with regard to that.
Right, because of the way that we fund schools. The millage, so that if you have a lot of money in that area, then there's a lot of money for the schools. And if you have a little money, and it probably should be done maybe on a statewide basis rather than on a community-wide basis, because otherwise all you do is continue to perpetuate, inferior education. And how do you expect people to climb the ladder of opportunity if that's the case? Now, in my case, it was a little bit different because, I had a mother who really pushed me and encouraged me. So even though I was in terrible schools, poor system, I went outside of that system and, took advantage of the local universities and libraries, all the things that were out there to supplement my education.
Well, if we were to pinpoint what exactly we could spend your money, are we talking about books? Are we talking about better teachers? Are we talking about a better venue?
It's the facilities and all of the facilities in general. I mean, I've been to some public schools in affluent areas that just blow you away with all the stuff that they have. I mean, it's just incredible. And then you go to some schools in poor areas and, it looks like a third world country.
Yes. Well, it would appear your thoughts on mechanisms that still exist for success. You mentioned it yourself. You took advantage. What else would you suggest to our viewers out there who are in dire straits, and where do you see them going in order to take advantage? There is an opportunity for the American dream. Let's put it that way.
Well, one of the things that is proliferating at a tremendous rate are homeschools. Mm-hmm. And people are learning how to use their resources to amalgamate their resources and to amalgamate their talents to provide superior education for their youngsters. And, they're able to create these co-ops and, take field trips and go to museums and do all kinds of amazing things. That seems to be working. I encourage that. I encourage some of the charter schools that work. You have to have alternatives because that's the only way that the public school system is going to improve if they're being pushed.
Yes.
If they set the agenda, nothing's going to change.
Sure, of course. Well, in your new book, Created Equal, The Painful Past, the Confusing Present, and the Hopeful Future of Race in America, it's all covered, and we want to let people know, I believe it is out now. And
it came out this week.
Okay, great. Good timing. It's available in hardcover and Nook book and audio CD, I believe.
And anywhere the books are sold.
Okay, books are sold. Well, my comment is this. Let us hope that the doctor's healing hand can cure our ailing world. And what's next for you? Now I know you've got irons in the fire. What are you doing next?
Well, we're working very hard with the American Cornerstone Institute, which we started. It's a think tank / do tank, which focuses on those cornerstone principles that made us into a great nation: our faith, liberty, community, and life. And then we also have the pediatric program called Little Patriots. LittlePatriotsLearning.com. It's a free program because we have great underwriters who underwrite the cost of it all. Beautiful cartoons that show our history, that show our values and the principles. There's a little guide called Liberty Eagle, and Liberty Eagle has a right wing and a left wing. Can't fly with two right wings, can't fly with
I love it. I love it. Now, what age group are we talking there? Where does it start?
K through 5.
K through 5. All right.
And we will be expanding it into middle school and high school as funding allows.
Well, it's very exciting, and I'd love to have you back on Connecticut Valley Views.
Absolutely.
I think there's more story to come.
Oh, there's a lot.
Yes, I'm sure there is, and I'd like to know, people's reaction to the book. I think this is a hopeful, and we need hopeful, Dr. Carson. That's what keeps people energized. That's what keeps people keeping the American dream, the opportunity that it still exists. And the very fact, I think, that you've done the Little Patriots, that's where the children start to get, let's use the word, indoctrinated at an early age. And if you can do that, that will be the path they're on. What is it? So you plant the tree, so let's see, how the tree grows. And you need to do that early on, and then that's the way the children will go in the right direction.
Even our enemies know that. Vladimir Lenin.
Yes.
Said, "Give me your children for 4 years to teach, and the seeds that I sow will never be uprooted."
Oh, you have so many great expressions. They capture, I think, what people need to hear, particularly right now in these turbulent times. So again, if you come to Connecticut, love to do a live with you, and certainly would like to visit some of the schools and introduce your book, your website and your new book. I think that would be very exciting to do that together. I am very supportive of your effort.
I'm very, very fond of Connecticut, having gone to college there.
Yes, Yale, right? Isn't that right? Okay.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Carson. I very much appreciate your time, and we look forward to completing your book. I've started it and look forward to completing it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Susan Regan, host of Connecticut Valley Views, and thank you for joining us today with my guest, Dr. Ben Carson. Please see all of our programs on ctvalleyviews.com. Thank you again.